Hey everyone, welcome back to yet another episode of the Forever Forward podcast and calling out loud. Really not hosting this one as I'm used to. Justin's going to do all the honors. And today we have in the special episode Nicholas and Elizabeth from Smart Building Collective to talk about everything that we've been trying to discuss on what's smart now. Justin has prepared a very cool way of getting the guests to introduce themselves. So without much ado, I'll just simply pass on to Justin to do his rituals, and I'll try not to deviate much from the flow, but a couple of questions from my side might just come your way, Nicholas and Elizabeth. Over to you, Justin.
Well, look, I think as I'm glad he's called it cool. I mean, basically, it's just laziness on my behalf to get people to tell me what they want to speak about, rather than me kind of like dictate what I want to hear about. But look, I think it'd be really interesting for listeners to hear, firstly, about who you are, what you do, why it matters for whom, but also like some idea of like how you got there, your journey. How have you ended up in this space? So why don't we start with Elizabeth, and then we'll let Nicholas follow.
Yeah, well, first off, thanks for having us. We're really happy to be here, and we're fans, obviously, of the podcast. I got started with this journey quite unexpectedly, actually. I had a job that I loved. I worked in one of those kind of Google-esque workplaces that we talk about now, and had everything I ever wanted, and then ended up overworking myself and burning out hard. If you have read my book, you know that I fell asleep during a bikini wax, and that's kind of the moment where I hit the wall, so to speak. So I came over from the west coast of the US to Europe to kind of look at what was happening in Europe that was going really well. What's the work-life balance like in the Netherlands? And where is it going wrong that the burnout is increasing here? So started researching that, doing huge, large-scale research projects with CBRE, Edge Technologies, GSK, Booking.com, all this sort of thing. And pitched a PhD project to a university here with the biomedical engineering department, the psychology department, and the business department to try to see how can we change the way that we work. So I'm the nutty professor, writer, passionate weirdo that loves the idea that we can do a lot better. And that's kind of where I'll hand over. Yeah.
Nice. So my name is Nicholas White. I'm also one of the co-founders of the Smart Building Collective, which is the institution behind the Smart Building certification. And our paths crossed in a really interesting way, because I started my career off from doing large-scale IT projects in big companies, and traveling around the world implementing tech. And I was always really disheartened by how these big companies would roll over their people in the process of putting in this tech, right? They'd say, here's your new technology, your life is better, my job is done. And you say, yeah, no, actually your job is just beginning, because you have to engage the people, you have to change the process, you have to change how people think about the way they work. And so I equally burned out, and I burned out from a very different view. I burned out from, I had a pretty awful manager who controlled every inch of my being. And since then, Elizabeth and I have learned about burnout, right? It comes from three distinct aspects, and I'll let you dive into the research, but it's lack of control, a feeling of lack of control, which I had complete, stress, being stressed out about your work, and then lack of sleep. And if you can think about it, those three things work in unison with each other, and you just kind of bury yourself with these three aspects. And so I met Elizabeth, and Elizabeth and I thought, hey, there's something here from research and transformation. Those two things together could be massive, could be massively helpful and impactful in the world. So we started a company called Lab, Learn, Adapt, Build, which is also the acronym, learn, and then you adapt your strategy, and then you build from that. But it's also a lab. It's about research. And then at that time, Elizabeth got these incredible research studies from the built environment, from real estate, to say what is the impact of the built environment on people. And for those, she built some living labs, which was very difficult to do, quite expensive, quite time consuming, political. And when the study was done, the studies were amazing. The results were incredible. But those living labs died because the business process wasn't in place to kind of use that data continuously for a long time. So we started to ask the question, this is like 2017, 2018, where is there a standard that we can plug into and do this research more collectively as a community? And everybody we spoke to said, yeah, that's a really cool idea, but it doesn't exist. And so we set out to do that. And we built a partner network, and we were working with the research and the universities in the space. And we launched the Smart Building certification in January of 2020. And we've been hammering away at that ever since.
Great. Well, look, again, thanks very much for participating and sort of giving us that backdrop. I kind of like you, as you probably saw when I was trying to sort of group the different things that you suggested around sort of people, process, platform, planet, profit, whatever. I mean, given that you have developed this framework and you are prepared to discuss it, I think why don't we start with answering why do we need smart certification?
Yeah. I'll take that question, and I think it's a really interesting one, and I think it's a really valid one. And I think if we look at where the Smart Building certification came from, it wasn't necessarily set out to put a stamp on a building. I think people are looking at certifications for a number of reasons. They're looking to validate their work. They're looking to benchmark it, to see that they're on top of it and ahead of this curve, or that their innovation is far enough. And they're looking at it to explain to the market in a meaningful way that they have done a good job with their building, and that their building is more valuable because of the investments and the work that they've done. And I think those are really, really valid, and they should be recognized as needed. Where I think that we look a little differently at the certification is that there's no one size fits all when it comes to smart building. Every building is very, very different. The context of what you're trying to do with your building also needs to show itself. And certification shouldn't be this burdensome task of throwing a bunch of information over the wall into a black box that you never hear from again, and here's a stamp and you're done. It's actually a continuous process. It should be about continuously diving into it. So I would say that certification is changing, and I think if we look at the bigger certifications in the world, they understand that there needs to be a continuous element to this, and I'm just so proud of the Smart Building certification, in that it really allows the uniqueness of an asset to show itself. For instance, you can have 2 platinum buildings that do it very, very differently, right? So, of course, they're doing a lot in all the different categories in a meaningful way, but you can see that they have emphasis in one area over another. And yeah, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think what we love about the certification that the collective built is that it really plays by the rules of real estate that we all know are there. We get buildings that get faster rent outs or sellouts. They sell for a premium. They're considered, they have that notoriety and that's those accolades, but they also have this ability to learn from each other, to check their work, to join a group of people who are all very curious and interested in making the building better. So we like that it plays by the right rule, the rules that it needs to, and also plays by some rules that will hopefully push the market to make better buildings, because we do have some responsibility in doing that.
I'm going to sort of put Nicholas on the spot a bit, actually, because he very kindly came over to London recently to participate, well, earlier this week even, in a round table. And one of the, I don't know if I could say there was consensus, but there did seem to be some agreement about a distinction needing to be made between certification and standards. Did you kind of buy into that, and did you see that as being an important distinction? Because sometimes I see certifications being described as standards, whereas certainly yesterday the design side and the deployment side saw those as being two very different things.
Yeah, I think it was a really interesting part of the discussion, and it was it was good for our reflection as well from the smart building certification. I think if you look in the market for some of the certifications that are out there, there's very much a checklist approach of, do you have this in your building, and then here's your stamp because you have adhered to the checklist approach. And in that regard, that could be seen, I guess, as a standard, a certain level of what they're doing. But the smart building certification works completely different in the sense that it's a very dynamic process of getting the story of the building out. And like I said, you could have two very distinct different buildings. You could have a platinum that focuses on ESG, sustainability, cybersecurity, whereas its neighbor is focusing on human performance, human collaboration, and how to get the most out of the asset in that way. And what we have within the certification are a lot of links or bridges to the different standards that you would expect in those different areas. So for instance, in cybersecurity, you have NIST standards. That is in the certification as which standards do you use to adhere to your cybersecurity goals. So what we see is that smart building is a very big topic. It's a very broad topic, and there's a lot of different ways to get to Rome. And then within that, of course, there's a lot of standards that should be adhered to. So we'd like to see ourselves as a tool to kind of identify the different standards that need to be put into your building.
So just one room for questions from me, if that's okay. So, Nicholas, I find it very intriguing when you mentioned that two buildings could have similar ratings, but do very different things and probably have different set of objectives. Just wanted to take a step back and say, when people come to you guys for certification, what are some of the typical objectives that they come with? I mean, you did mention very clearly that it's a way of validating their work, communicating to different stakeholders, but what sort of is it like sustainability or and what are the key objectives which they come with? I mean, would be very curious to hear that from you guys.
Yeah, you want to?
Yeah, I could start. Maybe I start.
Yeah, you start.
Okay. So a lot of times what a building will come with is they said, we think we put a great building together. We want to show the market that we have a healthier building. We have a more sustainable building, really meeting those performance goals. But there's also an element of the best buildings we've seen have the most curious people that we've ever met. These are people who would never say they're a smart building expert. They say, I'm on a journey. I've really gotten into this. I would love to talk to anybody that you have. I would love to talk to different companies that you work with, that you really that really contribute to the certification, but also just work well with other companies or other technical solutions. So the reason their boss sends them to us is to get the validation to make sure that the building is rented out or is sold or is celebrated and having that mark. And we're very proud of the reputation that we've built, and we're so happy that we get to do that for them. The fun part of it for us and for them is usually how can we make this better? How can we play with this a little bit? Who do we introduce you to? Do you want to do something special? And we kind of have it's an unwritten rule, but it's also a rule. You have to share some of your secret sauce. Like, can we talk to the market about this? can we feed back to the technical solutions what's not working, kind of just sharing the knowledge, because we want to make a big jump in the market. We want to make buildings better faster. So
yeah, and I think to add to that, I think that we typecast smart buildings as the same across the market. It's like, oh, we're talking about a smart building, but we need to dive down a little bit deeper to understand that every asset class, every application is completely different, right? So, I mean, what you see a lot of speculative buildings that are built by a developer and they don't know quite yet how it's going to be used. That process and that program that we run with them is going to be very different than an owner-occupied building where they've built it completely to the spec of what they're trying to do. We've recently certified a university where they have put, 3-4 times the amount of technology in that building because it's all about testing it. It's all about education. It's all about helping students understand what's possible out there. And what's so funny about that one is that they are now, years later after building this smart building, only now are they looking at how can facility management take advantage of that tech, right? So it's a completely different reason for having that smart building. We've done a fully staffless hotel where there's 0 staff and they're using smart building for how to build a nice user experience. We've done restaurant where they use smart technology to manage the crowd and the lines. And so you see completely different motivations and goals for how and why you would bring out a smart building. And the latest interview I recently did for a building we certified in Norway, and we're about to publish a white paper on it, which is we're really proud of it. But he said, if you set out to build a smart building, you're going to struggle. It's going to be a challenge. He said, what we did is we built the best possible building we could. And then we looked back at that building and we said, wow, I think this is pretty smart. How do we validate it? And that's how they came in touch with us to kind of compare it to others in the market. But that's smart was not why they did it. They built it because they wanted to build the best building, and they used technology and digitization to do that.
Just a comment, Justin, before we come back to you. You guys have, Nicholas and Elizabeth, you've already become my favorite and become a fan of yours. And this is not to patronize or flatter you, but I think the line that you said, Elizabeth, when you said it's the curious people who make the building smart. I think there's so many of us who often miss out this fundamental aspect and not talk about people. But enough of my fanboy moment for both of you. I'll probably get to live that sometime later. Back to you, Justin.
Well, they can't have two in the same podcast, fanboys. But I guess like what's kind of going through my head as you're talking about this is because within that discussion around certification and standards and also legislation and that being slightly different was also definition. But, given that you're saying there are these different people with different buildings wanting different outcomes and them to exist for different reasons, are we ever going to get a common agreement about what a smart building is?
Well, we have a definition and our community agreement on what it is. But I think what you'll get benchmarking. And I think to Umesh's last question to us of kind of how do you do it? What we do is we benchmark on the total level per asset class. So per asset class and per asset function, I guess you're going to get a very different kind of view on what is smart and why do you have it. And then we have a bunch of sub-modules with underneath the total, which is building usage is about how do you manage the usage of the asset. Building performance is about sustainability, ESG, energy, water, those types of things. Environment is about health. Security and safety is about physical and digital, and user behavior is about how you collaborate with each other. And all of that is brought together with connectivity and infrastructure, because without connectivity and infrastructure, the whole thing falls over. And then we have a module called Integrative Design and Maturity of Smart. And this is a fascinating space because every building does it completely different. You'll see one building that do it with 30 technologies. You'll see another building that do it with 5 or 6 technologies, and they can have the same level of functionality. But I think what's really interesting in that aspect is that maturity of smart is that they're going to different lengths and different reasons for having that. And I think to your point, Justin, benchmarking is really where you're going to get that alignment. You know, it's what works, what is actually adding value to the asset and what is not. And I think until we get to that point of the decisions we're making are all adding value, you're still going to get some ambiguity and some variance in there.
And not becoming too concrete. Like, we need differences. You know, when we understand further, we have, you know, a school, a child's school versus a university, a home versus a workplace. All of those things should be able to be very different. And one of the things that we learned is that, yeah, they all do it very differently. We had some where we thought, oh, they're early in the process. Should they not fill in the entire assessment? And what we learned is actually some of them were going to great lengths to make sure that SMART was way beyond where it should be for core and shell, for example. But we saw that when you allow companies to go after what their goals, what they want to do for the building, you help them a little bit on the way, and not say, oh, you know, you didn't get this check mark because you need to do this or that. You get just this incredible output, and you can really fine tune something that's already just quite extraordinary.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, I mean, I think what you're touching upon is something that Umesh and I are both kind of fans on, which is the concept of jobs to be done and problems to be solved. And therefore, I think you're kind of saying that there, that, you know, the thing, the smart thing is defined in a way by the problems it helps solve. And like user functionality just being only one of those, because that's a particular stakeholder group. It could be operations and management being another, or whatever, you know, or as I think it's Stuart Lipton says, whatever gets tenants, you know, to take up occupancy of my building the fastest is smart. So those different stakeholders have different jobs to be done, problems to solve, and solutions being, you know, that sort of problem solution. I didn't kind of want to bring that into the discussion at the round table, but it was kind of heading that way, I think, as some kind of consensus. So, okay, the honest truth now. How do you screw up smart?
I want this one. Yeah. How do you screw up smart? There are many ways to screw up smart. So I think one of the things, and I almost talked about it in this last discussion, but one of the things that I think a lot of real estate stakeholders are waiting for is that black box, right? We're going to put smart in. Here's the black box. It takes care of everything, you know, black and white. There we go. And it just it does its thing. So I think when you talk about smart, if it isn't a tool to solve a problem, like you said, if it's a technology for technology's sake, you know, I study human computer interaction. And one of the things that we see is when you implement a technology with a human being, and of course, if you want to make an experiment complicated, just add humans, right? If you implement a technology, human brains have this desire to outsource things, right? So navigation, phone numbers, right? Who of us knows any phone numbers anymore? And who of us, they did this amazing experiment where people who use their navigation every day couldn't use it. And then eventually, of course, they learned how to get to where they were going again. But we outsource things. So if we implement smart as a end all be all, that it's gonna run itself, it's gonna do its thing, it'll take care of whatever needs to be doing. It doesn't need human beings. That's certainly a great way to screw up smart. because it will collect data, it'll implement some things, but it needs to know its why, and it needs to adjust with that. Another thing that we mentioned earlier is trying to make a smart building for smart building's sake. Wiring a bunch of technology in the building and saying, hey, it's super smart. Okay, is the space utilized well? Is it a better functionality? Have you improved because of it? All of that kind of thing. And then trying to be a smart building expert on your own, I think, is the best way to screw up smart, because it is so diverse. It is always changing. And the applications that people are figuring out minute by minute are extraordinary. So if you're going to be, an island on your own at this, it's going to be incredibly challenging. And I think the people who are designing and putting together smart buildings are champions. And I'm really a huge fan of everything they're trying to do and are doing. But the collaboration that you can have from finding, I understand human performance, human computer interaction. I understand healthy environments. I'm not an expert on cybersecurity, right? We have amazing people that work on cybersecurity that know more than, that it's scary how much they know. But trying to do this on your own and trying to get it done, kind of just, it's smart. It's got a bunch of wires in it. It's done. You have anything to add from that?
No, I think that's right on. And when I was explaining the methodology earlier, I think one of the things that is so different about the smart building certification is the human interaction piece, and that was our definition. It's not just technology; it's what people do with that technology that actually makes a difference. Yeah.
So, following on, I think is a sort of natural progression. Then is well, why don't we sort of just go sideways a bit, given it's an area of Elizabeth's expertise. So what is the science telling us about the potential of smart for humans?
Yeah, not black and white. So smart in general, or anything that you want to focus on in particular?
Well, you suggested the question to me, so I was hoping you might.
I think what we have discovered as just the potential of smart is incredible. I think what the application of that, we have no idea, because what we're looking at in better environments, acknowledging the differences in human beings, the different lifestyles, the brain chemistry, everything that we can do in changing and nudging environments. I think what we can do is far beyond our imagination right now. So I think what is exciting is just getting started. Can we make buildings healthier? Can we start designing for unique individuals? I talk about that a lot. Can we create buildings that are more responsible and thus better working into our actual daily lives, not the cookie cutter we're trying to push ourselves through, which is exhausting us and not working and not collaborating and innovating in the way that we should.
So, okay, I think, Nicholas, do you want to add to that, or should we move on to the...
Well, I heard a great saying the other day about, research. It's important that we are factual and that we strive to be factually complete. And I think that being factually complete is really, really difficult, if not impossible. But I think where smart buildings are powerful is that they start to give us facts that we can run off of. And you see a lot in sustainability, you see a lot in health, you see a lot of different kind of siloed facts that we can improve on. And now with the smart buildings coming together as a whole, you start to even get more factually complete. And then you can start to think about where AI is going to take us and how it's going to evolve smart buildings from a holistic perspective. And I think if we just look back the last 4 years, 5 years. These smart buildings are becoming much more holistically designed and holistically driven. But that's just in the last, few years. So I can't wait to see how we evolve these things in the coming 10 years. It's going to be amazing.
So, okay, I think that kind of leads neatly into the question, which is probably the way you planned it, was which is what's the right level of smart? But I'm going to throw something on top of that, and that would be, and who gets to decide?
I don't know.
Who should get to decide, or who does get to decide?
Well, probably both, maybe.
You want me to? So I think, if we look back at our previous questions, the right level of smart is dependent on what you're trying to do with your building, and also the maturity of your organization to be able to handle the new technology and the new data and the different aspects that are coming from that smart. So I think we need to do a really good job in that enterprise change. I have, so the CEO, Patrick from Neovit, I was at their conference in Norway, and he said, Nick, stop calling us a prop tech. We're not. We're enterprise technology, and that's what we need to start thinking about. We need to start thinking about how does this technology actually impact the business that the building or the organization using that technology is using it for. And I love that, because I think it speaks to the work that needs to happen now in the process and in the governance in order to adopt that technology. So I think some organizations, some buildings are needing of more technology than others at this time, and I think the right level is very much dependent on the need and the goal. And I think we need to move away from just putting in tech for the sake of tech, because what we're seeing is buildings that are putting it in and then not using it and saying, oh, we got burned on that investment because it's not delivering value. Well, smart is a couple more steps than just buying the technology.
Do you think use cases can get in the way? Because I've seen people have libraries of like 500 use cases. I mean,
oh, in that way, I thought you meant use cases as in best practices and benchmarking, those types of things. So on that side, the best practices, the benchmarking, the best cases, I think they're needed now more than ever. If you're talking about the 500 use cases to design a smart building, absolutely. I think that we put more emphasis on those than we actually do on the process to get value out of the smart. So I 100%.
I mean, if there's a room to add, in one of the points you were mentioning, Nicholas, you mentioned about continuous process of looking at certification, not as a one-time sort of a process. I'm just curious whether you guys do tend to look at a lot of data that comes out operationally. You track it, and once people are reviewing your certification, how much do you fall back on that? Because in my opinion, if that itself can be shared in an anonymized manner, I mean, I think has the power to transcend the market. So, I mean, just curious on how much do you guys use the data from the smarts that come out of the certified buildings that you certify?
Well, and we get it on both ends, right? So we get the building that's changing and evolving, but we also certify our technical solutions. So when they update, we see, oh my gosh, the technology is changing and what it can do. So we see it from that end, and we see that the building's changing.
Yeah, but I mean, to your point, it's not like we don't get the energy data out of the building as an example, So what we do is we look at what functionality does this building have? Do they have the ability to manage occupancy levels, CO2 levels, energy? Do they have that in real time? Do they have forecasting abilities? Do they have AI? What is the level of functionality that the building has? And then we look back at how did they get there? So how did they build their infrastructure and structure it in a way to achieve that functionality? But then we also look forward from that functionality. How are you driving value from it? How are you actually getting something out of it, which is very much that, both the beginning and the end are human process. How do you get value out of it? And I do, we recently eliminated recertification every 2 years because we said that's not helpful. You come around every 2 years and you say it's time to pay up again, and they say, well, what happens if I don't? Do I lose my certification? And actually they do. And in the same regard, it's, why we just did this, we just did this work. So we actually we launched recertification on demand because, it's needed when you're trying to benchmark your work, check what you've done, check the improvements,
Sell your building.
sell your building, lease your building, put it out back in the market. So if that takes 5 years, then let's check it in 5 years. Let's not do it every 2 years because,
And it doesn't mean that it's certified for those 5 years. I mean, it's certified, but it's certified in the year it's certified. That's the same. But we don't.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so it's platinum 2023. And if the benchmark changes a lot and we make some nice noise in the market about how much the benchmark has changed, maybe you want to check your work.
That might be the trigger for them to come back and say, hey, I want to be certified for this benchmark, and that's it.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
What can I learn? We've onboarded new solutions and programs that are doing innovative things. Justin just did this fantastic roundtable discussion with lots of really creative, innovative, interesting people. Those people are not standing still. So when you come back in 3 years, what's changed? What can we learn from each other? And I think that's it, right? It's about education, it's about learning, it's about collaboration and community.
Or if they're doing another building that's quite similar, where they say, "Oh, this is almost the same thing. It just we did this other thing that we're excited about." So that can be nice.
Makes
So
sense.
my cheeky question about who decides. I mean, look, clearly when you're certifying a building, you decide because you have a certification methodology. But I think really the question was kind of linked to one which was thrown into the discussion on Tuesday, which is who owns a smart building? Is that, and what role does HR play in that? Because there's a people aspect, and there's a technology aspect because there's a chief digital officer, there's a property manager, occupant versus landlord. So is there any resolution that you can see about that? Who? So maybe it's what's the right level of smart could be reframed as what is the right level of smart for whom, or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, and I think what's really interesting will be as more and more people work in a smart building or play in a smart building or live in a smart building, how their role grows in here. So occupancy sensors have shown us what we've all known for decades, right? The 15-person conference room never gets used. And and it's better to do something else with that space. But I think if we make data-driven decisions, and the truth is these owners or developers are making, they know that if they want high-paying tenants, if they want the younger companies or the hipper companies, they need something to show that they're making sustainable efforts, which of course part of our certification focuses on that. They're doing healthy and smart spaces. They're doing all of these kind of things. So I think what's really interesting is how the tenants are actually pushing this forward in and of themselves. We had one certification, I'm not going to name names, but they actually said, our part of the building is amazing and is a platinum, but the main parts of the building are dragging us down to a gold level. And so what are we going to do? And actually pushed, the tenant experience, and it kind of rolled into this amazing thing that ended up happening for the building. And the building improved and sold for a huge premium to a great company. But the pushback is quite a powerful thing for the pull and the push from the tenant experience. I think that's going to be interesting to watch.
So, applying some pestle type analysis, do you see the sort of R of, not that R is in pestle, but do you see, I think it's in L for law, do you see regulation kind of becoming an increasing part of like, you know, what the right level of smart has to be rather than could or should be. Definitely.
I think you're seeing it in different parts of the world evolve a little bit differently, right? I think for Europe, it's taxonomy. So EU taxonomy is going to change the way that we pay taxes and the way that we are looked at to pay taxes. So, and then, you know, in New York, you have law, what is it, 97, that is all about energy consumption. And for any of those aspects, the governments and the institutions around laws and around these things, they need data, and they're going to be asking for data. And the only way to produce that data is through technology and digitization. So it's definitely going to push the entire sector into taking it seriously and using it in a meaningful way. And to what level they have technology and to what level they go into smart functionality, that's we need to prove the value of it now. You know, I think we've pushed past the early adopter phase where companies have put in a lot of technology and now they're saying, oh, maybe it went too far, or, you know, that one didn't add value because they didn't think about a business process around it or whatever it may be. So there's now this kind of step back and a relook at, okay, which aspects are really truly proving value, and those are the ones that will continue to excel.
And I think a lot of the community in Smart sees that the hard work that the sustainability movements have put in for many, many years, we're kind of benefiting from them greasing the wheels a bit and getting this started. And I think we need regulation as to push, and we need regulation just it's the right thing to do. I had a colleague who visited a school during one of the huge tests where I don't know if you guys had that, where you were all in the room and somebody had high heels and of course was rocking up and down the wood floors. But the CO2 levels in there were at a point where nobody should be taking a test, right? It's where you can get dizzy and headaches and this sort of thing. So we have buildings that are not performing for the people in it, not performing for what we need to do globally for sustainability, and aren't protected enough from a security standpoint to have as much data that they do, as well as many other things, of course.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, one of the follow-up podcasts is going to be with two people who are kind of more focused on sustainability and, you know, energy management platforms. I mean, I have to say, based on the discussion we had on Tuesday, I was kind of a bit overwhelmed about all the different standards that people were talking about and saying they had to conform to. You know, the list seemed to be growing endlessly almost, and how you kind of navigate that, hopefully they might be able to give some clarity. But sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
You should come look at what we're doing with the certification, because we have to keep our eye on all of those different kind of frameworks and different standards, because it needs to be useful. People need to be able to kind of process all that information. It's a lot. And break down silos in that process.
Sadly, there was a kind of quite significant event recently for this country. I think maybe in Europe that might be a bit easier, because there'll be some sort of agreed set of things that people have to comply with. But still, there's a lot more.
You can come back.
Yeah, I know.
I just wanted to add a point. Sorry, but I think one of the points where you said the legislation, but I don't know how much are you guys following what's happening in Singapore. And one of the things we've been discovering is that maybe the movement towards smart may not just happen as an holistic sort of a regulation, but could also happen how government entities source service providers. So, for example, in Singapore, the government, which owns majority of the public infrastructure, has basically put a lot of emphasis on digital. And that has also been driven by the macroeconomic activity, because a lot of people who work in the buildings from the perspective of technicians and engineering staff actually come out of Singapore. And post-COVID, they said that all FM service providers need to make sure that you put adequate technology in place to be able to risk manage that, so on and so forth. So, I mean, I think you're seeing that a lot of that in the US. So just wanted to throw open this entire point that my personal take is I don't think we'll see legislation from the point of view of smartness, but we will see legislation or policy movement from the point of use cases, ESG being the case in the point, right? But you will have and there will also be some of the macroeconomic activities or let's say trends which will drive. Now, I don't, it doesn't appear to be a big issue in the UK, but in North America, the number one worry for FM service providers is the lack of skilled tradesmen, and that's driving them to use smarts to their effect, and saying, okay, if asset owner is not going to put, we have an incentive to do something more. So that just wanted to add that perspective onto the overall movement that could happen or fast track it.
You're also active in Australia, where neighbours is a standard
big enabler.
have
Yeah.
to comply to. So that, I guess, is driving data and driving technology around energy management. But I mean, as I say, we're about to do another podcast on that. Hopefully that might be feeding into some of the things that you have to think about as far as your certification. I guess we're coming up to this who should pay for all of this? Is this, and I presume you mean tenant versus occupier here, is that right?
Yeah, it's so funny when you give questions before a podcast and then you have to rethink about it. But it is that, right? So one of the things,
sorry, Nicholas, there's a room for a bad joke. I mean, if there's one, I would love for you guys to give the answer that you did not intend to give, and then when you hear back the recording and say, "Oh, we didn't want to say that."
Exactly. No, but we really we position Smart Building Collective certification for 2024 as the year of value. Like, everybody's looking at smart and saying, what is the true value? And what's beautiful now is that we have this incredible infrastructure, community, data, all this insight. And we now, from that insight, need to pull out the wisdom of what is adding value in the smart building sphere. And we're putting together a really cool think tank on return on investment, and we're working with a bunch of companies to dive into that. And what you will see as the hypothesis is that value is being generated in different parts of the business, from a tenant perspective to the owner to the facility manager to all of these aspects. And what we need to do as a community is look at where that cost sits from an OPEX and from a CAPEX perspective. And right now, that differs very much per project, per building, per situation. But that splitting is going to be really, really important. And that's what we hope to help solve in this year. And then you see all this innovation happening about turning the CAPEX into OPEX, right? You see all these companies that are taking on the financial risk, buying the infrastructure, and then leasing it back as OPEX. And I think that's fascinating. And I think that the industry is going to keep pushing that forward. But yeah, how that evolves is going to be amazing, because all of a sudden you'll have these entities that own all the infrastructure, which owns part of the building then, right? Because they have a huge, stake in it. So I think it's going to be really, really interesting. And I don't think we're close yet in having that answer. But it's definitely a struggle that I think the conversation needs. Yeah.
But I think it's also I think it's also fun to either say, if somebody wants to get certified, say, all right, I'll if we get certified and we meet the goals that we want from certification, we rent out before we launch, we rent at a premium or we sell at a premium, in part because of this certification, then I think that person should get some of that. I think they should get some kickback from that, because it's because I think that's really interesting and it's worthwhile. I also think if you do, the typical thing with certification was a stamp on the wall, there you go. If you really go to the limits that you can, where you say, all right, we're going to talk about what we're doing. We're going to really share like why this building is special, why we put this together like this. You can get marketing department involved. If you involve your tenants in the process, one, you'll have better transfer of technology. There's a lot of lost in translation when you shift a building. Get them involved in the building and making it better. You can get budget there. Like the more people you involve in a great process, then that can share the cost of certification, and it's a no-brainer. Certification is also not expensive, so it's something that can help a lot if you really lean into it.
Yeah, indeed. And I think
But I'm biased.
Yeah, and I think to the value or the cost of the smart building, it's not an easy subject matter. You know, the challenges are also that every country has different rules and regulations and ways of looking at it. Like, for instance, in Germany, as a investor, you can't add additional services, you know, and then in other countries we say, oh, use the smart building to add additional services to your leasers. So just that basic, very big difference, you know, determines everything about how you split the cost and how you spread it.
I mean, it's interesting because, like, in the previous podcast, which was really with this people from in the FM industries from the two sides, one with occupier client and one with a with developer landlord clients, and like the kind of conversation was really around the sort of strategic triangle of where do you think the industry is at, where do you think it's heading, how do you think we get there. But one of the kind of challenges that they talked about was, like, you know, what you're also talking about here with smart is like digital transformation going on in general, more broadly, and that's also, and I think we have touched upon this in this one too, but that's also linked to change management and getting people on board. Do you see that your certification, and I don't want to call it a framework because you said you were against frameworks, but certification methodology is could you see that being flipped into like a change management process or model?
That's how it's designed. You know, it's because we look at the functionality, we look at integrative design, we look at maturity of smart, we look at value, we look at how that infrastructure creates bridges to GRESB and WELL and BREEAM and, you know, LEED, and it helps you to achieve all of those goals that you're after. And then the biggest difference between ours and others is the huge emphasis on process, governance. So we have a peer review so Elizabeth came from academia. Whenever you write a paper that goes to publication, you have to have it peer reviewed, which you guys know very well about. And when we built the certification, we said, shouldn't this be peer reviewed? You know, that makes a lot of sense. So we have independent assessors that look at the certification with us. And the certification is built up of quantitative data and qualitative. And the quantitative is pretty black or white. You either have a sensor or you don't. But the qualitative is all the gray area. It's like, how did you organize your company to use smart? How did you build your integrative design? How did you make those decisions? What is your financial model around your smart building? And with this information, that's your change management. That's your transformation aspect, is how do you add value to that process? That's really important, and benchmark to others that are doing the same so that you can kind of learn and do it better.
And that's the building's favorite part of the report usually, because it's having smart building experts come in for basically no cost to feedback on their building, to work with the people that are building their building, whether they're internal or external, and feeding back. So that's That's almost always the building's favorite. Their favorite part is hearing that they have a platinum dozen. Then it's
No, and what we didn't expect actually in the process was for these assessors to have such a unique role, right? Because what they're doing is they're assessing buildings from all around the world, getting all these different cultural inputs, different structural inputs, different asset class inputs, and they get to look at, different case studies, fresh off the press, firsthand. And that's a really cool role.
Yeah.
We recently did our first building in India, and Umesh, you're from there, from what I understand.
Yeah, true that.
And if you compare that culturally to a building in Norway, it's worlds apart, right? And they're just completely different in how they're doing it. So I think it's a fascinating role for sure.
But that's a conversation to have for some time later. Would love to know how your experience was doing that first certification in India, but maybe for another conversation on our podcast. I'll not hijack Jonathan's agenda.
Look, one last question, I guess, and then maybe you could tell us a little bit about where people may be able to meet you next or see you, like things like that. But what are the things that we are not talking about, and why that you think people should be? I'm guessing that's why you're asking.
So much. I think what's amazing is we're in this spot as a modern culture where we're craving information and craving information based on something, and we have access to information so much that I think there's this huge desire to understand what happens when we put technology in a building. What can we do? What is possible, and this sort of thing. What I don't think we're talking about is most of it. I think we need to have real conversations. I think we need to get to the crux of the problems that we're solving together. I think we need to make commitments to make things better, faster, and to do it in a way that can involve everyone, to bring everybody on board, where everybody can play a part in making things better, if you will. And that's why we have a lot of content that we're going to be working on.
No, I think Smart Building Collective is built from a very altruistic perspective in this regard. And I think to your question, Justin, I think we've come from a very traditional conservative industry. Real estate is, they want to do it because their neighbor is doing it. And actually what we need to be doing is forging new paths together and being willing and vulnerable to speak about those, not only the good things that are coming out, but let's talk about how we mess things up, how we, the mistakes that we've made, the challenges that we've have. We were on around just a casual table with some of our partners, and people started just talking about the mistakes that had been made. And this table was just, off the chain laughing the whole time because they were all just so outlandishly crazy. And I think that was such a nice experience, but it would never happen publicly in a panel, because people are too scared to,
we're too polished,
to put our necks out there.
Yeah.
We touched upon this in the previous interview, and and I said, historically, I have learned more by failure than I had by the happy accidents of success. So look, one last
and you're not alone. Everyone has learned more from their failures than from their successes.
Arguably, that's how we do learn, I think. But the one last kind of thing for you to do, promote yourselves, and also let others know where they might be able to see you. So do you have any webinars coming up? Are you going to be in an event soon? What is it that you're doing that people might want to be collaborating with you on? And
you want to go first?
No, you go ahead.
There's a lot going on. So next week we have a panel with Smartfutton. We're interviewing them. Smartfutton is a water management company. We are meeting Wave by AGC, which is such a cool solution. It's a coating for glass that helps connectivity come in more effectively. I'm part of a panel discussion with Haltian and PropTech Connect next week. So that's going to be a good one to tune into, and I think that one should be broadcasted quite publicly. And I think last night I was at the Pravada Jubilee. Pravada is the number one real estate convention here in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, and that's taking place June 11th, 12th, and 13th. And we are sponsoring or part of a whole smart building incubation section where we will have 9 of our partners all in this smart building space. And yeah, come join us and learn about smart buildings. We're going to be doing tours and workshops and panel discussions, and it's going to be a really, really cool event. But yeah, follow us on LinkedIn, Smart Building Collective. You can see everything we're doing there, and smartbuildingcollective.com. You can get in touch with us directly at any time. Happy to help.
Yeah. And yeah, we have the Euro FM conference in Rotterdam next month. We have Norway in April, right?
Yeah, it's busy.
Berlin in May, and then the US in the summer. So yeah, we're everywhere and at the same time.
I mean, see you at PropTech Connect, eh?
Yeah.
That one we're working on together with you. So let's see what we can do.
Great. Well, look, huge thanks for participating. Over to you, Umesh.
No, I'm just super envious of all your schedules, man. I mean, you guys are traveling so much. You guys are everywhere. I mean, I'm just going to stay back and do my calendar as well, at least just for now, and then go back and stay here for some more time. But Elizabeth and Nicholas, thank you so much for tuning in. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation between you and Justin. I mean, I think some of the perspectives that you guys have put make so much sense. They sound logical, but for some reason they're not practiced. And I'm super happy that you guys are putting so much of an effort to bring that human element back, which is where it is supposed to be. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. Thank you, Justin, for getting Nicholas and Elizabeth. You can call any favor. I'll do anything else for you if you want, for this one amazing piece of conversation that you've let me be part of it. I'm hopeful that everyone else will get to enjoy this. Hoping to meet you guys in person sometime soon. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.